Good evening, everyone. My name is Don Schnitzler. I'm a member of the Forest History Association of Wisconsin. And tonight I'm going to be talking about the value of historical newspapers for when we're researching our state's logging history. And these are resources that are available online for free. And so it's just nice to be able to take advantage of them from the comfort of your home. So we'll start off with,
Say, Don.
I just all at once there was a pop-up in my screen here, but it's gone now. So, and I can move my slides. Anyway, so we're going to talk about the value of historical newspapers tonight. And I think that one of the things that's an advantage for someone who does family history is they get to attend lots of different classes and sessions about researching different ways of researching family history. And there's a crossover between what we can do as a family historian and as a local history historian. And one of those things that are shared resources, specifically the historical newspapers. And so tonight we're going to talk about the historical newspapers. I'll talk about how they can be used to search the state's logging history. And I will share a little bit about the value of the newspapers, how to find them, where to find them. A specific collection called the Wisconsin Digital Historical Newspapers, several research strategies that you can use when you're searching, and then how to use the snipping tool, just in case you're not familiar with the snipping tool. Now, I had Tom send out a handout. There's lots of websites that we're going to be going to and lots of links. The links on the file that was sent to you, if it was sent as a PDF, are active links and you can just click on them. And if not, you just copy the address and paste it into your URL and go away. It'll go right to that website. They're also listed on each of the pictures that as I go through the talk tonight, you'll see the different links at the bottom of images or embedded into the conversation. But to start with, we'll talk about the value of the newspapers. First thing I think that's important to think about them is that these are primary source documents that were created at or around the time when an event occurred. And that's what we need to think about for primary sources. We want someone who recorded the information that had direct and personal knowledge of what was being written about. And the historical newspapers were fantastic sources of documents or documenting the day-to-day lives of our ancestors and the businesses and communities they lived in. There's also something that you'll find called a secondary source connected with newspapers. And quite often what happens is a historical society or group of people will go through and compile an index for different newspapers. Those indexes are using the same primary source, but because it was created later or after the time, then it's considered a secondary source because there's a chance of putting mistakes into these. And so secondary sources would be an index created from primary source, the newspapers. Here's a picture of two primary and secondary sources. The image on the right is from the Monroe County Local History Room. They do a great job indexing newspapers, and they provide an index that is easy to search and searchable by a single term. And so in this case, I put a search in there for the word logging, and it pulls up a list of different locations where the word logging appears. And if you look at the image here, you can see that there was logging in the Northwoods, there was logging accident, a number of logging accidents. Employed at the logging camp, the name of a manufacturing or a cross manufacturing company, people with the last name logging. What's nice about the index, it can help narrow your search to looking for specific things in a newspaper, but it's always important to go back and look at the primary source. On the left is a picture of the La Crosse Tribune, which was taken off of one of the sites we'll talk about tonight. But it gives you a chance to look at the actual image of those newspaper clippings. So here we mentioned Crosset Manufacturing Company, and over in this article, you can see Crosset Manufacturing Company is being reported in. One of the advantages of having the actual newspaper in front of you is that when you look at the index, they take pieces of the information in the newspaper and put it into this format so you can track a record or find something. Here you get the full text of what was being discussed in that index. So it's always important, if you can find the primary source, to go back and look at the primary source. For finding the historical newspapers, and we're going to specifically be talking about Wisconsin papers, there's two resources I like to use. The first one is Guide to Wisconsin Newspapers. It's an online document that's available through the State Historical Society, and then through the Library of Congress, U.S. Newspaper Directory 1690 to present. And we'll just kind of take a quick look at these and talk about them for a second. The Guide to Wisconsin Newspapers 1833 to 2004, as I said, is available online. You just, with a click of a button, can download it to your computer. And once it's downloaded, it's very easy to search. And the real purpose for this guide, and as well as the U.S. Directory, is to identify what papers were published in particular areas. You know, when it comes to searching an area, quite often we're looking at things or areas where we're not familiar with what the newspapers were. These guides help tell you what the newspaper title was, and then also can provide you with information about where those papers are kept today, and if they're available, how you can access them. So this particular guide, again, from 1833 to 2004. And what it does is it goes through and identifies all the newspapers that were published. And if it tells you whether they're in English or in some other language. Actually, they don't tell you it's in English, they tell you if it's in another language. For starting tonight, I wanted to kind of begin with Stratford and Unity. And the reason will be clear in a minute, but we're going to talk about doing some searches in a little bit. We're going to be using March Rapids as an example. So what I was specifically looking for were the newspapers that were around March Rapids, Wisconsin. And so looking at a map, we have March Rapids located about 4 miles east of Stratford. And so Stratford would be one option. And then it's probably 7 to 10 miles from Unity. I know that the families in that area were connected to the Unity people, so maybe something got reported in the Unity paper. So those were the two papers that showed up in the Marathon County section of this book that might have had something to do with reporting events in the March Rapids area. If you look at this, what it does is it tells you when the newspaper came into being, what issues are available through the Wisconsin State Historical Society. And for those that aren't familiar with the Wisconsin Historical Society, if you need a newspaper, not necessarily digital, but if you need to access any Wisconsin newspaper, that's the place to start. They have microfilm copies of, I think it's 1,600 different Wisconsin newspapers. So lots of resources available from the State Historical Society as far as just microfilm copies of newsletters or of newspapers. The other thing about this is it tells you what newspapers followed or succeeded a specific issue. So the first one was the Stratford Journal. Excuse me, the first one was the Stratford Reporter. It was published from 1910 to 1913. It doesn't look like any of them exist anymore. And then that was succeeded by the Stratford Journal, which was published from 1913 to 2001. And it exists from 1916 to 1942, and then 1943 to 2001. So it gives you an idea of what the papers were and where they're located. The other site that's where you can use to find the names of newspapers is what's called the U.S. Newspaper Directory 1690 to present. And it is found on the Chronicling America site. And if you look in the upper right-hand corner here, there's a box that's got kind of a slight pinkish cast. You click on that and it takes you to the search box for identifying these particular newspapers. And again, what happens here, you can search by the title if you know the title. So for example, we were looking at the Stratford Journal. We could click on the S and look for the Stratford Journal. But most of the time when you're looking for a historical newspaper, you don't necessarily have the name to do that. So what I always do is I start by selecting the state. For example, here we'll put in Wisconsin, then we'll put in the county, Marathon, and then we'll select the city. And there's a drop-down box that shows up for each of these. So I've selected Wisconsin, Marathon, and then we get a list of the communities that are in Marathon that we can look for further information on. Now, March Rapids is in the town of a Plain in Western Marathon County, and there's actually March Rapids listed here. And then there's another community that's just a short distance away from March Rapids called Little Rose. So if I was looking for a newspaper, I would start off by selecting those to see what it said about the possible newspaper coverage. And then because, as I mentioned, Stratford and Unity are close by, I would also look at those. So what you do is you click on one of the names, it goes into the space up here, and then you hit search, and it brings up some information about the particular paper you're looking for. Now, when I selected March Rapids and Little Rose, both of them brought up the Stratford Journal. And the reason is because the Stratford Journal's geographical coverage included those areas. So if you look over at this about page about the Stratford Journal, it says geographic coverage. You'll see Little Rose mentioned here, and you'll also see March Rapids here. And so the community paper that kind of covered the news for March Rapids and Little Rose was actually the Stratford Journal. Still, I'm bullheaded. I want to see what I can find out about Unity. So I look at the Unity page. Oh, first off, I have to do this. I look at this and it tells me what's available at the State Historical Society for those newspapers, and just spells that out. Then I look at the Unity paper because I want to see what was published there. Unity had a paper called the Marathon County Register, and this is the about page. Again, here it just says that it's covering the geographical area around Unity. It gives you the dates of publication, 1902 to 1961. And if you go down to view complete holdings, then you get to the information that was available, like for the Stratford paper. And I didn't put that in here. What I wanted to point out, though, was when we were looking at these sheets, this is the Marathon County Register, and you see this about page that has just lots of information and a lot of white space. And then I pulled up the one from the Wausau Pilot. You see that same information, but instead of having all the white space over here, you see an image. And that image is what indicates that this particular paper has been digitized and placed on the Chronicling America site through the Library of Congress. And so no image, they're not digitized through the Library of Congress. If there's an image, then they're available through Chronicling America. And that's just, kind of a little guideline to keep in the back of your mind when you're looking for information about these papers. Now, when it comes to the historical newspapers, I figured as long as we're talking about Chronicling America and that site, we'd start with that one. What we'll do is we'll talk about the Library of Congress Chronicling America. Then we'll switch to BadgerLink, Wisconsin's online library. And then from there, we'll go to some of the links that are provided for genealogists through the Ancestor Hunt. And it's provided to everybody, but it's referred to as the Ancestor Hunt. So I said I was going to use March Rapids as an example. And my great-grandparents actually lived out in March Rapids until 1918. And my great-grandfather skidded logs for the Dowd sawmill. And so we have this picture that was a family picture of the Dowd Son and Company stave and heading mill that was taken during the flood of June 4th, 1914. The picture is really what got me started thinking about, I'm going to use the newspapers to see what additional information I can find about them. But one of the things that's important to think about when it comes to starting a search is not to just jump out there and start searching for things. You really want to think about it first. So the first thing you do is you identify locations you want to look for information. We've already talked about the town of Plain in Marathon County. And then you want to kind of do, what do you already know about this area? Because by looking at what you know, it can kind of help set the direction for future searches through the historical newspapers. So what we know, and this is thanks to Randy Rose, a member of the Forest History Association. He wrote a really good book called Ghosts of Wisconsin. And one of the ghost towns that he talked about was March Rapids. And so he kind of traces the history of the sawmill at March Rapids. And it was built in 1877 by two brothers, J.B. and B.B. Holmes. In 1887, they sold the mill to Thomas Marsh. And then in 1892, Thomas Marsh sells it to the Dowd and Sons company. They were a barrel making enterprise, and they actually had operations down in Pittsville, Winona, Minnesota, and a couple other places. It wasn't just a small operation. About 1905, the Wisconsin Central, which had built a line out to the sawmill, started pulling the tracks. And so the community started to shrink kind of at that time. Much of the timber was gone. They still hauled the sawed lumber and stuff out to Stratford. They had a couple tow tractors, and one of them went through a bridge in 1911. The two drivers were killed. And then in 1913, they had a fire that destroyed the mill, and they built a new mill. And then in 1921, the mill shut down. And what's important about all this information is, again, it helps guide you with your search. So when we start looking for things, we're looking at what we already know before we start looking for something. So we're going to start the search. And when you use Chronicling America, you have two options for your searches. You have what's called the basic search, or you can do an advanced search. Now, the basic search is usually where I start out on just about everything. And the basic search is on this blue line here, where you can select the state, a time period, and enter in search terms. And that's basically the basic search feature on Chronicling America. Now, I did Weyerhaeuser. Weyerhaeuser was a Wisconsin name at one time. I just wanted to pull off that, put that name in and see how many matches I got. Just doing Weyerhaeuser by itself came up to 9,949 matches. That's where you're going to need to use the advanced feature, because you want to narrow the results so you get fewer results and more specific results for what you're looking for. But we're going to use Dowd and Son company for our first search. So I kind of went through this, and again, what we're going to do is use that, what we know, to look for more information. So I put Dowd and Sons company in here, and I left the and out because it shouldn't make any difference when you do the search. They tend to not pay attention to punctuation. So Dowd, Sons, and Company is the search parameter here. I hit return, and it brought up a list of 19. When I typed out the word Dowd, Sons, Company, I got 19 matches for that result. And one of the things to keep in mind about historical newspapers is they like to abbreviate words and hyphenate words. And so I went back and I put in the Dowd Sons Company with just the CO instead of the company, and I came up with 160 hits. I wanted to verify that the and didn't make any difference, and so I put it in with Dowd Sons and Company, or and CO, and we came up with the same 160 hits. Did the hyphen, and I only got one extra result with the hyphenated word. And then I did a deliberate misspelling. All of these papers are indexed by optical character recognition, and it's possible to, not possible, it's very probable that there will be misspelled words in there. And so sometimes if you deliberately misspell words, or if you're not getting the results you expect, deliberately misspell words, and you will probably find what you're looking for. So in this case, with Dowd and Sons instead of Dowd and Sons, there were 13 additional matches. As far as tips, I always start off with less is more. You can always narrow the results. If you get a lot of results, you can add search parameters to bring the number down so it's an easily accessible or easily workable number of newspapers to review. But if you cut too many out to start with, you may miss something that's important. Again, you don't need punctuation. So if you're typing for like example, JD and BD Homes, you can leave the periods out after their names. They won't look for it anyway. I leave the space in, but leave the punctuation out. And then as I did here, I just took out the and sign and left that out also. The one thing about, and we're going to talk about Boolean searching in a little bit, but one thing about the Chronicling America site, when you put 3 terms in here, it links them together automatically. You don't need to put hyphens around them. So with Chronicling America, if you want to consider something a phrase and you put 3 words together, they're going to look for it as a phrase. And I already mentioned the optical character recognition. Now, when you look at this page, what comes up again is the number of hits, and you will see thumbnails of the pages where those terms that you were searching for match. And you can see that some of them have quite a few areas highlighted with red. If you click on this, you can use those red highlights to kind of guide you to that particular page or part of the page to see what the text says. And we'll look at that in just a bit. You also have the option when you're looking at this to sort or to limit results. For example, here where it says show only front page. I tend not to use this when I'm searching because I want to see the whole paper. A lot of times little tidbits about logging history or someone's reminiscences of logging days or something does not appear on the front page of the paper. So this would allow you to see just the front page, and I tend not to like to do that. You can also sort by relevance, and I do use this one all the time. When I'm looking at any of these search results, I always convert it into by date, and then I try to work from the present to the past. The reason being is that as you're going through present articles, you may find clues for something you're looking for, or another search term you'd want to look at for earlier newspapers. And it's just a nice way when you're going through them to keep them in order. Say you've got 160 matches and you want to read each one of them. It's easier to search through, let's say 1922 to 1911 and know that you have to start again in 1910. And so by doing them in order, in chronological order, you can kind of make do a better job at reviewing all the articles that match. And then the last one is personal preference. You can either see 20 images per page or 50. 50 gets pretty small, and so I usually leave it at 20. Now there's also an advanced feature, and the advanced feature is here by this button. And if you click on it, it will bring up the search boxes for the advanced search. And what it does, it again allows you to select the state. You can select specific named newspapers in the state. You can choose a date range or add a date range, a special date range. You can limit to the search the front cover or to the specific pages. When I was doing some research a while back, I wanted to look at just the editorials, and they were always on page 2 of the newspaper. So I could say that I only want to see page 2 in a specific title, and that's where I would find the articles. But generally, I don't use those, but if there's a special reason to do it, you could. You can also select what language, and there's a number of different languages in a number of different language papers in this collection. There's one for the Czech Americans and one for the Finnish Americans in the Wisconsin collection. So you can pick specific nationalities, or languages that you want to search or read when you're doing this. And then you can search with any words, with all words, with a specific phrase. So if we wanted to do Dowd and Son, or Dowd and Son Company, you could put those for the Dowd, the Sons Company with the ampersand sign in it, and do a search for that phrase. Or you could put March Rapids. And one of the problems with this one is that if you put two words in here, it will pull them up as separate words. You can't link them together like you can with this phrase. So if you want Dowd and Sons here and you want to put Rapids in, you're going to get every mention of every Rapids connected to it. But by searching with multiple terms, you usually can narrow the results. You can also put in something, for example, if someone has a title. I'm going to use Mr. Upham from Marshfield. He was governor of the state of Wisconsin. You could put W.H. Upham here and then put also governor there and say that you want it within 5 words or 10 words, whatever it is, to see how many references you get specifically to Governor William Upham rather than just William H. Upham. So those are kind of the things that you would look at or as far as ways of searching this. And again, I was specifically looking for something related to the flood of June 1914. So I could put the date range in, but I just want to see what it comes up with Dowd Sons Company and the dam, because the dam gave out that day. When I did the search, I had 8 matches for the terms dam and then the phrase Dowd Sons Company. And if you look at the dates here, we have June 12th, 1914, June 16th, 1914, June 11th, 1914, and then another June 11, 1914. Chances are those are the papers that are going to have the stories related to the dam. And in order to look at them, you just click on an image and it will pull up the image like this. You can see the words highlighted that were the search terms. And if you want to enlarge them, there's little buttons here. We'll talk about those in a second. But it gives you a chance to read the article. You can put your pointer on it and drag it, and move it, move it from around in there so you can see the whole page. Now, when it comes to the toolbar, the first buttons increase and decrease magnification. So you can bring that image up close, or you can send it back so it's a more full page image. If you want to see it just the way it opened up, you hit home and it takes you back to the original full page view. You can also click on that and it converts it to a full screen. So you lose all the surrounding information. It's just the PDF of the newspaper page in front of you. You can select the specific image that you want to look at. The images relate to the pages. In this case, the Wauwatosa News that day had 8 pages, and the story about the Dowd Sawmill flood was on page 5. You can use these buttons to go back or forward on specific pages. And you can look at thumbnails of all the pages. You click on this and you get the thumbnails that look similar to the search results for the other one, but it's specifically only that particular day's newspapers. Then you can go back to the day before, the day ahead, or look at all issues in the next section. And then you go and you can convert it to text, so that if you want to save it as a Word document or something, you can actually copy the text and paste it into a Word document. You can look at it as a PDF. There's also an option to save it as an image or for it to be seen as an image. And then this clipping tool is an important part of it because it allows you to clip the image and save it. And I know that's a lot of information in a short time, but they're all really easy to work and you can't mess anything up. So just go in and play with it when you get a chance. Here's an example. This is that Sawmill Dam Goes Out story. And what I've done is I've taken the little plus sign here and increased the magnification so that the part of the story that I want to save is right there. Actually, it's right here. And then what you do is you go over to this scissors and you click on it or click it, And what it will do is it will take that part of the page that's in view and create this image, this PDF of the document. And what's nice about it, it gives you the citation for the paper across the top. It tells you where the image came from. And these images on the Chronicling America, excuse me, all came from, all came from the Wisconsin State Historical Society. There is a link that's referred to as a permanent link. And it's the one that's important to keep if you're trying to document where you got something, because it will always be that link. It's posted there. And then you have the image of the article itself. Now, you have the option of printing the page, and if you print the page, it does give you the source citation. If you download the page, it only downloads the image. So when I save these, I generally clip the paper, and then I do a snipping of this particular section so that I have all of this information saved with the image, and then paste it onto a Word document and save it. It's a couple steps, but one of the things that's important is figuring out how you're going to save the results you find, and then kind of doing a consistent way of saving them into your documents so they're easily retrievable. And that's something everybody has to kind of think about themselves and decide how they want to do it. Now, I mentioned that you could push or hit the text button, and this is what it looks like in a text format. And we have to remember that all of these newspapers are converted to text by optical character recognition. Some computer goes through and scans the images and tries to put it into a format that text format, and it's not perfect, but it does do a pretty good job. This one here is actually really good. A lot depends on how clean the original copy of the newspaper that was being scanned, or the original microfilm that was being scanned, how clean that was at the time that the images were scanned for the digital file. And you can look at it and see, like, for example, here in this story, you can see this, the word sustained, and you can see there's an L there instead of an I. And that's just typical for optical character recognition. What I like to do when I find these, or if I'm trying to save the text, is I will find the text in this stream of text here that I'm specifically looking for. I will highlight it and copy it into a Word document, and I will leave the first pasting of it just as it is, just as it was taken from the text from the Chronicling America. Then I will clean it up so that the mistakes aren't there, and I will save it. And I always make sure of copying the information on the top here to the top of the document, again, to document the source, where it came from, and that persistent link, so that I can always go back and look at the original document should I have a question. Now, Chronicling America and the State Historical Society have had a partnership basically for the last 4 or 5 years. I think it's probably 4 years they've actually been working on it, and it'll be 5 years next year. And then we have time that they couldn't do much because of COVID. But a few years back, the state of Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Historical Society, started digitizing newspapers from our collection to share with the Chronicling America. And this map shows what the coverage is for the state of Wisconsin today for Chronicling America. So you can see that we kind of got the geographical corners in the center of the state represented by the papers that have already been digitized. So there's 22 cities or towns that have been digitized already. There's another 21 titles that they're working on. And as they go live, there's actually links made to them right away. And I don't know what the progress rate is now because of the COVID pandemic, how much was done during the last year, but there's a list of newspapers on this website where this map came from that talks about the other communities that are being digitized at this time to be put on Chronicling America.
And Chronicling America also has a map, and you can see that for the United States, there's really good coverage of the eastern part of the state, eastern part of the country. Wisconsin's very well represented. There are some states where coverage is not that good, but we actually have access to more than 18 million pages of newspapers through Chronicling America. And when it comes to looking for logging history, we might start off looking in Wisconsin, but it's not uncommon to find things connected to Michigan, Minnesota, traveling west, or even out toward the east. One of the things about the collection from Chronicling America that's important is most of the newspapers that you will find listed there are pre-1925. The Chronicling America Library of Congress basically says that the papers that are more than 95 years old are probably in the public domain, and so they can have them posted here. They also have some newspapers which they believe are in the public domain that are less than 95 years old. For those that are less than 95 years old, there's a disclaimer or a comment there that the researcher is responsible for making sure that there's no copyright on them. But these are newspapers that are available for everyone to search and from their home. The other site that I wanted to talk about that's really good and specifically for Wisconsin people is what's referred to as BadgerLink, the Wisconsin's online library. And the website is in the handout. It's also listed here. BadgerLink is provided by the Department of Public Instruction. It's geared for students. It's geared for higher education students. It's geared for educators, researchers, different levels of interest. It's all there for people to use. The one requirement to use BadgerLink is that you have to be a Wisconsin resident or that you access it through a Wisconsin library. So if you were sitting at home and want to use BadgerLink to get to some of the newspapers that I'm going to talk about, it will require you to log in to the BadgerLink site using your library card. And I'll show you how that's done. There are more than 1 billion newspaper articles available through BadgerLink, and I don't know that that necessarily covers the ones that are through the newspapers.com library edition pages that we'll talk about too. So anyway, lots of information there. What I've done here is the page that comes up first is what you want to look at. So I've highlighted newspapers, and then I'm going to go to the login page. At the login page, again, they're going to ask you to select the library you belong to and provide a library card number. So if you're not from the state, you can't get in to use this. If you don't live in the state, though, they do provide links to where to look in other states. And also there's a sheet there or a form that you can fill in for assistance. So if you want to contact them for assistance, you can do this. And there's a number of terms. You can write in the question. You can send a file, a picture of what you're trying to or having problems with or trying to find out about. And they usually will answer you within a day, telling you what's wrong or how to do this or where to look for additional information. And if you don't live within the state, this is a resource that's available there telling you by state where to go to look for electronic libraries in those states. And it is something that's available in most states. So if you don't live in Wisconsin, you may not be able to use BadgerLink, but for example, you could use the Florida Electronic Library or the Iowa online resources and things like that. So there are sources or resources available for you also. So when it comes to logging in, as I mentioned, there's really just a couple steps to it. You have to take the first box here. It's a drop-down box, and it has a list of every library from the state and some schools. And so it takes a little bit to scroll through it, but you find your local library and click on its name. And then you go to the next box, and it asks you to put in your library card number. So you put in your library card number, you hit login, and it takes you to In the case that I had checked newspapers, it takes you to the newspapers that you want to look at. So the first one we're going to talk about is what's referred to as newspaper.com library edition. Now, newspapers.com provides library edition to people to use through the library for free. And then newspapers.com also has the option of a subscription service. The newspapers.com library edition provides access to 246 newspapers, more than 3 million pages of newspapers, and includes all 50 states plus those other countries that are listed. So there's a lot of information that's already provided for free. You don't have to necessarily have the subscription. The subscription, though, does have additional resources. And for example, I have a subscription to newspapers.com. And the reason I do is because there are a number of Wisconsin cities, Green Bay, Marshfield, Stevens Point, a number of papers that are not included in the library edition that for me, they made sense to have. But there's a lot of information that's available without having that special subscription. When you first click on it, and it doesn't happen every time, but when you click on newspapers.com, click down here, it will take you to the page. And like the first time you use it, it's going to pop up this ad. All you have to do is hit the close, it goes away, and you don't have to worry about it. And once you're there, you can start searching and using newspapers.com to your heart desire. It's all there and easy to access. Now, this is the main search box, but you can also, we'll have across the header different options. You can search, you can browse newspapers. By browse newspapers, and I didn't go through this, you get a list of all the different newspapers and the titles of the newspapers, and you can just pick and choose papers to look at and then basically read them like you're reading a newspaper. You can get a list of papers, You can get a list of papers by state and region, so you can pick out specific newspapers, and then you can click things and review clippings. And these are clippings down here. When you save a clipping, they go into a file and they don't necessarily see who it is, but the clippings are listed there and you can search them. And sometimes that helps and sometimes it doesn't. Anyway, so we're going to start here. And again, this is the same thing we did the last time. Let's talk about what we know. And this time we're going to talk about Williamboniface. And to be honest, I knew nothing about Williamboniface when I started this project. But this is a really interesting man. He was born in Luxembourg in 1864. He came to the United States when he was 12 years old. By the time he was 17, he was out working in the woods. And one of the stories I ran across talks about this guy not having the money to start buying equipment and tools for being a lumberjack. So instead of hauling logs out with a horse, he would carry them on his back. And then a local store owner advanced him $50 so he could buy tools to really get started. In 1894, when he got married, he was identified as a lumber dealer. In 1909, he and his brothers formed the Williamboniface Lumber Company, and it just keeps going on. When he died, the newspaper said he was a millionaire 8 times over. But this guy has a terrific story to read as you're reading through this, and it's all recorded in the newspapers. You just have to go out and look for it. Now, again, what I said is you want to let what you know about somebody guide your search. And so for today, what I'm going to do is I want to talk about Kimberly Clark, because this connection with the Williamboniface Lumber Company being a subsidiary of Kimberly Clark would be something I'd want to find out what's that all about. And so when I search, that's what I'd be searching for. Now, one of the things that's different between newspapers.com and Chronicling America is you can use the Boolean search tools to search in newspapers.com. And so what I mean by that is you can put quotation marks around things. So here I want to look for Williamboniface. I put quotation marks around it. it will look for the phrase Williamboniface. And I also want to look for Kimberly Clark. And so I put quotation marks around that. And so what it's doing is it's specifically pulling newspaper articles where both terms appear. If you look at the top here, you can see Kimberly Clark, Williamboniface is also mentioned in that story. And so it's going to be pulling specific stories where Boniface and Kimberly Clark are mentioned. Now, I want to just do a little bit about this Boolean search just to kind of talk about it. Ability to combine words and phrases using operators. And so if you are trying to narrow your search down, you use the word and. And so Williamboniface is the example here. This circle here represents everything where Williamboniface shows up. I've done a phrase for Kimberly Clark, and this circle represents everything for Kimberly Clark. But I specifically want to see those parts or those newspaper results that show both Williamboniface and Kimberly Clark. And so what we're actually going to be looking for or looking at are the results of where those two circles overlap. So this number of papers here, or the papers that appear in that area where they overlap, will be the ones that come up. So it significantly reduces the number of copies of papers that you're looking for. You can also use or, and or does have purposes. For example, I wanted to be consistent, so I did the Williamboniface or Kimberly Clark again. What that really gives you is two distinct circles. You got Kimberly Clark here and Williamboniface. You're not changing anything. But what if you did a search for Williamboniface and then a common misspelling? Say Williamboniface spelled Bonifas, which is the correct spelling, or spelling it like Boniface, which is another spelling that shows up when you're looking for his name. So sometimes you have to kind of think about what operators or what search terms you're going to be using, and deliberately misspelling words is sometimes a good thing to do. So anyway, the or, and then not if you're trying to locate something. For example, we know Williamboniface lived in Escanaba, but we want to find news articles that are reported him and not mentioning the word Escanaba. And so we put in Williamboniface, then the operator not Escanaba. And what it will do is if this is Escanaba and this is Williamboniface, all of these stories will show up, but none of these will show up in the results. And so you can use these terms to help narrow or focus your search. So here we did this, and a couple things I wanted to point out here is you can also search by result types or narrow by result types. In this case, I don't use this feature on newspapers.com because I always figure I'm going to miss something. I can determine myself what kind of story it is. So I tend to skip this one, but you can select for obituaries or marriages if you want. You can also look for specific newspapers. So for example, in the results here, we have 21 occurrences in the Escanaba Daily Press, 19 in the Ironwood Daily Globe, another Escanaba paper, Brooklyn, New York, and then Ironwood, Michigan. You get a list of the newspapers and you could specifically pick or filter for just one newspaper. Again, with the sorting, I like to switch this down so that I'm looking at chronological order. And again, I tend to work from newest to oldest. And so I would switch this to newest to oldest, and it would just rearrange the order of the results. And then more filters are in here. If you're trying to find something more current, you can add to the first column. But otherwise, typically, I tend not to do anything with this box either. Okay, and then as far as the date ranges, there's a couple ways of adjusting the date ranges in newspapers.com. You can go in here and select on a calendar the date ranges you're looking for. You can grab these bars on the end or sliders and narrow them down, and it will narrow the date. You can go along the column here and just select the decades, or you can switch to search the next bunch, or you can come down here and use the sliders there. They all do the same things. They alter the date range that you're looking at. And with location, the map here highlights the states where the newspapers are from. So you can select a specific state. If you want to look at Wisconsin newspapers, you click that one. If you want to look at Michigan, you click Michigan. You can do multiple ones, or you can do them individually. It's up to you. Then once we've got everything we were going to do as far as the selection process or the filtering process, you have one more toggle here that you can either look at large thumbnails or small thumbnails. And then after you've decided what you want to look at, it's just a matter of clicking on the thumbnail or the newspaper, well, not the newspaper title, but this box, clicking on it, and it will open up the actual article. Now, when you open the articles, the search terms are always going to be highlighted. So you can see Kimberly Clark here in yellow and Williamboniface there in yellow. And in this case, this story was written 10 years after he died, but it talks about his life. And if it's something you want to save, you can clip it. Well, I should mention first the find. The search terms here are the highlighted terms. You could actually change those if you want to click on find. And if you want to search for something else on that page, you could. The next button over is the clip button. And what you want to do there is you select the clip button if you want to save this. And to do that, this is where using the library edition of these, where you have to register. And to be honest, I registered for this account several years ago. They have never bothered me. But in order to clip and save the account, you have to have, or clip and save the newspaper clippings, you need to register with an email address for their account. It doesn't take but a couple seconds. And like I said, they have never bothered. It's just it's a way of filing the clippings that you're taking. And so I'll talk about the clipping for a second, and then I'll show you an alternative if you don't want to do that. So when you pick or select clip, what ends up happening is the box will show up, a highlighted box, and it actually shows up maybe about this large, but you grab the corners and extend it over the part of the text that you want to clip, and you have to move down to get it to the bottom where you want it. And you can take this as far as you want it and then go down to the bottom little square to move it, and it allows you to get the margins of the clipping to exactly where you want it. And once that's done, you clip the clip button, and it's over here, and it will bring up the clipping that you just made. And once you have the clipping made, you can decide what you want to do with it. You can save it to Ancestry if you're doing family history. You can email it to yourself or to a friend. You can share it on Facebook or Pinterest or whatever. Or what I usually do is I click the view clipping, and it will bring up the page for me to look at. And what I end up having is the clipping of the article. Over on the right-hand side is the source citation, which is, again, it's very important to always document where you got things. And if I remember right, I can't see the top because of where it is on the paper, but it's the name of the newspaper where it came from there also. Now, what I typically do is I just save this to my computer or to a flash drive if I'm at the library, and then save it with a document name. I tend to save things by date, and a title. So I would put whatever the date of the newspaper is here. I know it was 1948, and then something about Boniface logging operation and Kimberly Clark. So it's easy to save. Now, if you don't want to register with newspapers.com for any reason, there's a way around that, and that would be using a snipping tool, which is available on your computer. And I'll talk about that as we go through the next section of newspapers to look at. Okay. Now, the second collection of newspapers in BadgerLink that are worth considering looking for information related to logging history or forestry, is what's referred to as the Wisconsin newspaper, or the Archive of Wisconsin Newspapers. And this particular set of papers was originally intended to publish or include newspapers, contemporary newspapers, things from 2005 to about 90 days ago were included in this. And a few years back, they started adding historical newspapers. Today, there are 41 different newspapers on there for 27 communities. And there's quite a broad range. When we look at the list of these, you'll see they cover quite an extensive time period. Some in the 1800s, early 1900s, 1930, 40, 50, and 60. So they cover a good range of time. And again, when you look around the state, you can see it covers a good area of the state. And some of these are not available on Chronicling America. So it's giving you additional newspapers to search. And they are searchable PDFs, and we'll give you an example, show you how they work. So this is what the site looks like when you open up the Wisconsin Newspaper Association archives. And what I want to point out first is that when it opens up in the search newspapers from 2005 to 90 days ago. Now that may have some value to us if someone's running a historical story about a local logging operation or something, but most of the stuff that we're really looking for are the older newspapers. So on the right side here is a site that says switch to historical newspapers. And if you click on that, it will take you to a new list of newspapers here, and it'll tell you up here that you're searching historical newspapers. And from that, these are the newspapers that we want to look at. Now, there are, again, 40-some newspapers. I usually start by unchecking all of them because when I'm searching for something, I want to control where I'm searching. And so the first thing I do is I uncheck all, and that gives you a list of the newspapers here. And again, you can see date-wise, we've got 1932 to 1949 and 2005 to current, 1858, 1886, and then later. Here's one that goes from 1876 to 1963. So a real range of newspapers that are being covered here. So again, I just uncheck everything. Then I go to available dates. And for the most part, when I'm searching this, if I'm looking for something in an area, I'm going to look for the whole time frame. If it's a newspaper that covers a really long range, then I might go down and set a custom date range. But otherwise, typically when I've used this, I've left that blank and I've gone down to select or filter by the newspapers. The toolbar down here allows you to select a county. So you can see Barron County, Chippewa County, Columbia County, Crawford and stuff. For sake of argument today, I want to select Taylor County. The reason I'm choosing Taylor County is because Taylor County is not well represented on digitized newspapers, but here's one for the Rib Lake Herald from 1902 to 1921, which would cover some good logging information. So I'll use that as an example. And what I thought I'd do is I would start with Hemlock, because Rib Lake area, that was a good product for them up in that area. So we start for Hemlock. And what I wanted to point out was when you search for one term, you get 190 entries. Now, if you search for two terms, and so I added lumber, Hemlock and lumber, this is basically a Boolean search, but they don't allow you to use the quotation marks to keep phrases together. So you have to do single words. And when you do this, it drops the number of entries down to 109. Now, looking at this or thinking about it, I also wanted to see what was listed in Rib Lake for the Marshfield area, because our Mr. Upham sold his logging operation up to the Black River area, the Rib Lake area, excuse me. And so we've got 46 different entries that mention Hemlock, lumber, and Marshfield. And so that kind of tells you how you could use the Boolean search in this particular newspaper to narrow the results. So I wanted to look for W.H. Upham, and so I put in Mr. Upham's name. I didn't use any quotation marks. I tried. It won't let you do it, so it still keeps it together. And when I did the search, I came up with 45 entries with just Mr. Upham. First one is actually one that I thought was interesting. It said, Mr. Upham, the prodigal son, the Upham Company are again in possession of the old sawmill. And it seems Mr. Upham went up there and bought the sawmill back after it had been sold to him. And so I want to see this story. And in order to see the story, I have to go back a second. In order to see the full page story, there's this Google Drive box here. You click on it and it will download a PDF version of the newspaper. And it's the full newspaper, the full page. And you have to look at each page individually in this case. If you're looking for a small article, when you open it up, nothing's highlighted. You can do a Control F to create or to open up a search box. And then you type in a term. And when you do that, it will highlight the term. And here you can see Upham is highlighted in green in this case. This PDF format is really good if you want to do browsing of newspapers. And if you browse, it's just a matter of reading. Smart browsing is when you read a series of the same newspapers to kind of get a feel for what's on each particular page of the newspaper. And so, for example, I mentioned the editorials used to be on page 2 of this particular newspaper. So you got used to pulling up the papers on microfilm. You'd go to page 2, read the editorial, and then go on to the next newspaper and go to page 2 and look at that. That's a smart browse, when you kind of figure out where things are and are located so you can look at them. Now, once you have an article pegged that you want to save, you can either do a Control S and save the full page to your computer or your flash drive, or you can use the snipping tool. I mentioned the snipping tool a little while ago, and we'll talk about that also. And again, regardless of what method you save it, you need to document the source of the paper. So here's the snipping tool. Snipping tool is located on every IBM type computer. If you have Microsoft Windows or any version after Windows 7, if you go down to the start box down here at the lower left-hand corner of the screen, just start typing the word snip. And usually by the time you get to SNI, the snipping tool pops up. I keep my snipping tool saved on my toolbar at the bottom of the page because I use it every day. What it does is it allows you to actually snip things from the newspaper articles that you're looking at. And it's a matter of just dragging it or opening it up and then dragging the corners of the snipping tool around what you want to save. And I'll try to show you that here. If you're like trying to use it and you can't use the snipping tool itself, you can also do the Shift and Windows and S key to open it up a different way. And then you can snip anything too. So this is that same article we were looking at. I've opened my snipping tool because I have it on my toolbar. And when you click New, the screen will go gray, and then you get little crosshairs. And I've already got this done, but I put the crosshairs here, and I just reach down to the corner, and it opens up this box that covers the article. When you release it, it cuts it and puts it into as an image into a file. And once it's here, you can either save it, you can edit it, you can write on it. There are tools here for writing on, or you can email it to someone. I generally tend to save it and again, document where it came from, date the paper and things like that so you know what it is. The last thing we're going to run through quickly is the ancestor hunt. And the ancestor hunt is thousands of links. And this is really a page that's set up for genealogists. But for historical newspapers, it's a great jumping off point. And so we're going to go through and look at this real quickly. When you log into the Ancestor Hub, they just recently changed their site, and I'm still getting used to it myself, but there are 18 different collections that they highlight. The first one up on the top is the free digital collections link for newspapers. And if you look at this list here, these are the different categories. There might be some value to looking at photos or mortuary records and coronary records and other things. But for right now, what I think is of value for people doing local history and logging history is those newspapers. You click on it, and what it will open up is newspaper links to all the newspapers that they have. There's a little description of it, and basically it says there's thousands of free historical newspaper links. As of March of this year, there were 39,100 links to free newspapers. Now, those aren't all Wisconsin, but there's a lot of newspapers covered. When you click on that first section, brings up all the newspapers links, and they're arranged by alphabetically by state to start with. And what we want to do is scroll down to where you can see the Wisconsin Online Historical Newspaper Collection. You click on it, and it brings up a description of the Wisconsin collection. It talks about where our newspapers are, that there were over 3,400 newspapers published in Wisconsin, and then kind of talks about the links and general information about the site. Oops, I missed one. Anyway, what you do when you get this far, the first category is Chronicling America. And he goes through all the newspapers. And if you were to look at these, you can see all the newspapers that are listed in or found in Chronicling America. And if you click on the link, for example, Eagle River, I pulled up, if you grab Eagle River here, it will take you to the page about Eagle River, Wisconsin, the newspaper from up there that's already available on Chronicling America. And it shows you the front cover. It gives you the same information that we talked about before with the Stratford Journal and the Marathon County Register. You can start searching here. If you put something in the search terms there, the one thing I want to make sure everybody knows is it doesn't search specifically the Eagle River paper. Up here is just a general search, and you start with searching all the newspapers at the time. Okay. They also have a short section on Google News Archives. At one time, I thought Google News Archives was great. He only has 4 listed for as being available. I know there's more than that. One of the things about these that I usually use them for is if I know the date for looking for something, I pull it up and I browse the newspaper looking for that information rather than trying to search for it. You can use this search box here. Usually it brings up search results for another newspaper. It just isn't as user friendly as it used to be. But for browsing, it's great. If you can find the right paper and there's a link to all the different papers that are on there, looking for it by date and then browsing it, they work great. One of the things that I think is really important for us is what's called the county collections on this page. A number of the different counties have newspapers that are available for us to search from home. And when you look at this, there's a number of really good logging areas or communities in here. Rice Lake Public Library has Barron County, Chippewa County has Chippewa Falls, Columbia County has Kilbourne Public Library, Dunn County, the Dunn County News and the Dunn County Lumberman, Forest County. When you're looking at this, there's a number of sites that have multiple links to multiple newspapers that you can search from home. And they are all pretty easy to search. Algoma, Eau Claire, Oconto, Waukesha, Waukene. So there's Wanakee, excuse me. There's a number of different newspapers out there. The one thing about having different counties and different libraries setting up these programs is each one kind of selects a different search platform. And so several of them share, common search platforms, Newspaper Archive or the Rescarta here. It's a matter of figuring out how or working with what they have to search the newspapers. And I've used them all, and it takes a couple steps, Newspaper archives will require you to create a login information for a free account. Again, they've never bothered me either, but there's lots of information on these newspapers that you can search for home. I have relatives that lived in Rice Lake. And when I wanted to search for things, the Barron County Library site was a great site for finding that information in the newspapers. So it's something that's out there and easy to use. And then there's miscellaneous collections, and there's other things on that site also. I just thought I'd mention, like UW Stout has a collection for newspaper indexes for different things related to newspapers in Dunn County. And then you have the Civilian Conservation Corps papers in the eastern side of the state. There are links specifically to each CCC camp. In the western side, there's one link that you can search all of them from there. So they work differently, but they're user friendly when you get to them. So I've kind of covered a lot of stuff real quickly. I think the first thing that is, and the most important thing when you're searching for papers, is to kind of have a plan for what you want to know. And before you can do that, you have to think about what you already know, and then look at different options as far as where you might find that information you want. Always start by looking for less than more. So don't try to be too specific when you're doing your first search. You want to keep it kind of short or broad, and then narrow it as you go down if you get too many results. Remember that newspapers, especially the historical newspapers, were notorious for abbreviating words, and not necessarily in the right spots, but abbreviations, hyphenations are all things that were common in old historical newspapers. And so when you're searching, sometimes you have to play with the search terms to match what might have happened in those original papers. Search with hyphens, and again, not necessarily where you'd think about a natural break. Work from past to present, and misspell words. I use Boniface as an example. Mr. Boniface's name, B-O-N-I-F-A-S, is the correct spelling, but you can find the Boniface Lumber Company in the same area where it's spelled as B-O-N-I-F-A-C-E. So think about the spellings and think about how a word or name might be misspelled when you're searching also. And also keep in mind historical differences. I mentioned in one of the slides where we were talking about Mr. Boniface, it mentions that he was at Fosterville, Winegar, and Presque Isle. There were specific times when that community changed its names. And so if you're looking for Fosterville before 1905, it wouldn't have existed. After 1905 to I think it was 1912, it was known as Fosterville, but then it becomes Winegar, and you'd be looking for Winegar rather than Fosterville in papers at that time. And Presque Isle in 1959 was when it was changed to Presque Isle. So if you're looking for something related to Winegar, you have to use that Winegar term if you're looking at newspapers before 1959. The important thing is to keep in mind historical significance or historical dates and names when you're searching. And then again, always kind of plan ahead, because when you plan ahead, it helps to save the results so that you can find them later. And so again, that's going to be an individual choice, but how you save your results helps you be able to find those findings you have. So with that, I think I'm going to quit. The handout I know is long, but at least I was hoping that you wouldn't have to try to write everything down that I was talking about, and I'll try to answer questions if there are any.
I'm just getting unmuted here. I wanted to back up a little bit and just let you know that Don Schnitzler was speaking to us tonight. We kind of messed up on our messages here. And so Don is a member of the Forest History Association of Wisconsin, has does a lot of work for us, and we really appreciate it. If you want additional information about the Forest History Association, please go to our website, or you can contact us too. So, but for tonight, if you do have questions about his presentation, go ahead and put them in the chat box or in the Q&A, either one. But Don, we had one by email, and I wanted to get to that one. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Well, anyway, it was about the Lakeland Times in Minocqua and whether, they had any information about where those papers might be available.
Okay, I don't know that the Lakeland Times has been digitized. I'm sure that if you look at the Wisconsin Historical Society, they would be available there. The other thing that's, and I don't know where the person is coming from as far as where they live, but for example, if I was looking for Lakeland Times, my local library wouldn't have the Lakeland Times available for me to search at the library. But I could make a request through the State Historical Society for interlibrary loan of one of the microfilm copies they have. They would send it to Marshfield, and I could use it in my Marshfield library to search. And so it's important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, while you were presenting, I kind of pecked around a little bit, and I don't believe it has been digitized.
No.
It would be available at the State Historical Society, as you point out, though most likely on microfiche. So we'll go to some of the other questions that are coming in now. If I can get to them here. From Ed Forrester, your friend, how do you research across state borders?
Well, with the newspapers.com edition that's available through your local library, you will be able to search any of the state papers that are available. And that includes all 50 states and then 3 or 4 other foreign countries that you could search. So it's a matter of searching the same way. It's just a matter of doing the search and selecting the state when the map comes up with the shaded areas. Pick the state you want to look at, and you can search those newspapers.
I know our local library allows you to use the library edition of newspapers.com electronically through their website. So you don't even have to really go to the library. All you have to do is have a library card, and you can get in through their website. But sometimes it's a nice place to visit your library too.
Right.
Any way to search for specifically for photos?
Actually, the ancestorhunt.com has a link for photos. Depending on the photos, the area you're looking for would be the question. Newspapers, early newspapers in particular, are not good sources for newspaper or for photos. They didn't tend to use a lot of photos in early newspapers, and when they did use photos, generally the reproductions in the microfilms and then the digitized copies aren't great. And so when you're looking for photos, I would say you'd have to look at the State Historical Society for Wisconsin. They have a really good collection of historical photos. And then the other thing is to contact the local historical societies in the different communities. Northwood County Historical Society, Price County, all have their own sets of photographs that were taken in the area. So that's where I would start with photos.
For some reason, I'm having a hard time to see if there's chat. I'm getting the Q&A done and not the chat. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute here.
Okay.
Let's see if I can get to the chat. I got the Q&A. Oh yeah, we've got some questions in the chat. Lots of accolades for your presentation, and thanks. the appreciation for the handout. How often do you resort to using the microfilm versus the digitized?
It depends on what I'm searching for. For example, I do a lot of stuff in my hometown, Marshfield. There's one set of newspapers for Marshfield that are not digitized, and it happens to be a weekly newspaper that had a lot of good information. The editor was a good publisher, so I will resort to using that. A lot of times what I do when I have to do microfilm search, though, is first I will look for the digital copy so I can get the dates when things are, approximate dates of where to look for things. And it helps kind of focus the research on the microfilm so you don't have to spend as much time at it.
Yeah, I always find it frustrating. There'll be gaps in the digitation where there'll be a couple of years where the information is not available. And it seems like always what I want is in that gap that isn't digitized. And then you go back to the microfilm. I think we've gotten all the questions.
Okay.
And so I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about next month's webinar.
Actually, next month, we're taking the month off. July is a busy month. And so when we started planning these, we had talked about not holding the webinars during the summer months. We just working through everything. We've got July open and we're going to leave it open so we can have a break. And then we'll be back on the 3rd Wednesday of August. And oh shucks, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Is that the build up and the blow up?
I don't remember. I apologize, everyone. Watch the website and the Facebook page, and we will get the information out to you.
Hold on a second. I should have it here. Oh, so the build up and the blow up is the kickoff for our fall conference, and that's on September 15th.
Right.
So that's what's scheduled next right now.
Okay, but there are conferences for August, September, October, and November and December.
Okay. So anything else you wanted to add, Don?
If anyone is interested in giving a presentation, just feel free to reach out to us. Or if you have any questions about the newspapers, my email was on the handout. I'd be glad to try to answer any questions or help any way I can.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, Tom.